Welcome into the show today. Thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. If this is your first time watching or listening, hit that subscribe button on YouTube so this podcast shows up in your feed 6 times a week. A lot of news to discuss and break down because all week long, and I'm pissed off about this, all week long, we have been told by the insiders that are trustworthy that the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold were negotiating a contract and the Vikings wanted Darnold back to compete with McCarthy. We heard that over and over again. From the Schefters to the Rappaports, it was the same story. There was a little bit of a different story and tune coming from Alec Lewis, who mentioned that the Vikings would want Darnold back, but at a specific number. And you talk to these insiders, you talk to them all offseason, and every single one of them mentioned that Darnold to Minnesota makes the most amount of sense. And maybe it did at the point when they discussed it, but it never really did. Because why would you have McCarthy and Darnold both competing for the number one spot and have one of those guys be the backup unless you intended on trading one of those quarterbacks during the preseason? And it all goes back to 3 years ago when the Vikings wanted cap space. When Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah became the Vikings general manager, and when Kevin O'Connell became the Vikings head coach, it became all about cap space. All about cap space. From the moment they signed on to the moment right now, all of their moves have been based off how can we get the most amount of space available to sign and bring in guys that we need and that we want to fulfill those needs. So Darnold is most likely not coming back to Minnesota now that Geno Smith got traded from the Seahawks to the Raiders, which opened up a massive hole for the Seahawks to bring in a quarterback that can throw the ball around a little bit. Now, I don't know how intriguing of a team that is for Darnold because the Seahawks just released Tyler Lockett. They're in trade discussions with DK Metcalf, who is a wide receiver on the Seattle Seahawks right now. They need to completely change and revamp their targets on the outside if their plan is to indeed bring in Darnold. And that is exactly what the insiders are saying today. With the Geno Smith, says Tom Pelissero, trade opening up a spot in Seattle, Sam Darnold is not expected to return to the Vikings, who are now focused on other options they've been pursuing in recent weeks. Sources tell the insiders. Those options include re-signing Daniel Jones, who is mulling multiple opportunities. Now, if you're Daniel Jones, the likelihood that you will be QB1 in Minnesota next year is very slim. Definitely less than 50-50. And the Indianapolis Colts are interested in Daniel Jones, and the QB that he would be competing with is Anthony Richardson, who got benched for Joe Flacco. So if you're Daniel Jones, you go to another offensive guy that is capable of producing quarterback talents in Shane Steichen with the Indianapolis Colts, because they got a running game, they got an offensive line, and they've got wide receiver targets there as well. So if you're Daniel Jones, you probably are more interested in that position because it probably gives you the best chance to play next season. But Daniel Jones Of course, he's got a debate. He's got a discussion to make with his agency and, compare numbers. The Vikings are offering this. The Colts are offering this. But Sam Darnold, it appears, is leaving the Minnesota Vikings to sign with the Seattle Seahawks, probably when the free agency window opens on Monday. Because everyone talks about this open period to discuss signing, and as soon as it opens, multiple players are signed within the minute. So they've been discussing, they've been talking, and Darnold will probably sign with the Seahawks in less than an hour when that tampering period opens. So I'm just kind of pissed because all offseason I've been saying the same thing. Darnold will not come back to the Vikings. But then you read these reports over these last few days, and I got the reports right in front of me. Tom Pelissero, Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter. It looks like Darnold's coming back to Minnesota. It looks like they're discussing and negotiating a contract to get this guy back. And it just made no logical sense to bring Darnold back. Because if he lost the battle to be QB1, and if the Vikings did not trade him after they signed him, you would be paying a guy $20 to $30 million a year to be the backup to JJ McCarthy when there are other massive holes for the Vikings to fill, like offensive line, like secondary. If Cam Bynum and Byron Murphy Jr. leave, who's playing cornerback for the Vikings next season? Mekhi Blackman comes back. They had an undrafted rookie free agent on the roster. Who's playing corner? Shaq Griffin 1 year, Stephon Gilmore 1 year. There's a lot of holes the Vikings need to fulfill this offseason, and bringing Darnold back at a $20 to $30 million contract was going to be a massive hurdle to fulfill those holes that you need to fill. But everything that we kept reading from the legitimate insiders, this wasn't some random guy from Bleacher Report or from Yahoo Sports trying to get his name and throwing crap on a wall and hoping it sticks. These are the top echelon guys that we can trust. And maybe the information they received was right information, but it was a load of crap. Maybe the Vikings were feeding them stuff and leaking stuff that they wanted to bring Darnold back at this contract number, but it was a load of garbage because it never made any sense whatsoever. But now the truth has been revealed. The truth that set you free. Darnold is gone. JJ McCarthy will be QB1 next season. Also, the Vikings received tremendous news this morning, Saturday morning, because JJ McCarthy has officially been cleared to practice. This came from Tom Pelissero. Last year's first-round pick, JJ McCarthy, is expected to be cleared to practice this spring after missing his rookie season because of meniscus surgery. With Darnold on the way out, McCarthy's time could be coming sooner than later, but they still want to add a veteran. And just a few days ago, I posted a podcast with the exact title saying, Vikings do not trust JJ McCarthy. And the reason why I posted a podcast like that is because all of the reports coming from the top NFL insiders said that the Vikings were working on bringing Darnold back to Minnesota. 1 year later, it was the exact same Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold situation with the Vikings. The Vikings were willing to bring Kirk Cousins back, but at their number. And the Vikings were trying to bring Darnold back, but at a specific number. If this report was not crazy enough, the latest report coming from the same insiders has mentioned that if the Vikings cannot bring in Daniel Jones to be a backup to JJ McCarthy, and if the Giants go a different direction than Aaron Rodgers, the Vikings could be interested in bringing Aaron Rodgers to Minnesota if they can't bring back Daniel Jones and if the Giants explore different quarterback options. Aaron Rodgers, Mike Garafolo, could be in play for the Vikings if Daniel Jones doesn't return. Now, here's the key wording in this reporting. Could be in play. Doesn't say isn't in play. Doesn't say the Vikings are going to do everything in their power to bring in a 41, 42-year-old quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, to Minnesota and become a complete distraction right away in that organization. Aaron Rodgers could be in play for Vikings if Daniel Jones doesn't return. There is no chance Aaron Rodgers dresses in a Vikings uniform next season because with Aaron Rodgers' name attached to anything, it immediately becomes a bigger story than it needs to be. And a part of that is because of Aaron Rodgers' superstar talents that he's showcased in the NFL throughout his NFL career. And also a part of that is Rodgers' distracting personality when he goes on Pat McAfee show, when he makes controversial statements about certain things, even if he's right, it's still controversial and he's still being asked and he still needs to answer these questions, and so does the head coach. And is Aaron Rodgers or JJ McCarthy going to start for the Vikings next season? The Vikings don't want any of that. They don't want any of that smoke. Aaron Rodgers will not be a Minnesota Viking. And there's one guy that is brighter than all the NFL insiders that I've seen out there. And he goes by Crack Rock. Nobody knows who this guy is. He's got a Twitter handle of Crack Rock, CRAKROK. His description says, NFL owner insider from the golf courses of Palm Beach, Florida. And here's what he said about that situation. Stop the madness. Aaron Rodgers is not coming to Minnesota, period. Why are people so naive to believe such utter nonsense? I told everyone months ago what was happening. Now eat a reality sandwich and embrace JJ McCarthy. I repeat, Aaron Rodgers will not be a Viking. This dude, as unsure as we are about who this person is, understands what is happening within the Vikings organization, because for weeks he has been saying that Darnold is not going to be a Viking next year. And I've been saying the same thing because the money was never going to work, and that was not a part of the Vikings' long-term plan. But then when he received these reports from Schefter and Rappaport and Pelissaro and Garafolo, and how do you not take some of it seriously when they're the top cream of the crop in the business? And they're wrong. They're way off. Wasn't even close. Darnold's not coming back. And now they're coming with another controversial, intriguing report that Aaron Rodgers is a dark horse candidate to be on the Minnesota Vikings. Now, in their defense, let's go back to 2009. When Brett Favre was no longer coming back to the Jets, was he considered a dark horse candidate to land with the Vikings? Yes. There's no way that there were reports coming after Favre's departure with the Jets that he was likely to land with the Vikings because he retired again. Then he came back. Then he retired again. And then he came back. So as unlikely as it is that Rodgers ends up with the Vikings, as Crack Rock said, Brett Favre was also unlikely to end up with the Vikings, and crazy things can happen. But Aaron Rodgers will not be a Viking, and he will not follow in the footsteps of Brett Favre. As intriguing as fun a story as that is, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. All right, everyone. Thank you for making this podcast a part of your day and for watching and listening wherever that is. Hit that subscribe button and appreciate you making and watching this podcast.